So I want to spend just a few minutes talking about the value systems that come from a practice. I want to say that when we are involved in a practice, this is a legitimate source of what should matter most, our values in a given situation. What's a practice? I'm using this in a very technical kind of way. I'm referring to the work here of Alasdair MacIntyre. And he argues that a practice is a form of cooperative human activity that's complex, that's socially endorsed, and that's got its own coherence. A practice has its own internal excellence, its own internal understanding of what good practice looks like. It's got its own expert practitioners of that practice. It's got its own benefits, its own goods, and sometimes it comes with some external benefits as well. And the practice is an activity, an area of activity that by participating in it brings us these goods, both internal and external. So when I say standards of excellence, so I want to quickly up front say that one can see medicine as a practice. One can see social work as a practice. There are discipline-specific practices that have emerged over time. So what do I mean by, for example, excellence? Well, there's an excellence in social work practice that has been established over time as this discipline has found its footing. Right? There have been practitioners, social workers, who have come together to struggle with what it means to provide support to people who need support in society, to find their ways to meet their social needs as they engage with other systems like healthcare. Right? So social workers over time came together and they decided, what does it mean to be a good social worker? What are the ways of acting with our clients that demonstrate good social work practice? And from this emerge standards of excellence. And over time, these standards become things that we teach young practitioners to live up to and become the hallmarks of evaluating whether or not a certain practice is actually being done well. A practice has internal goods, internal benefits. That the achievement of the excellence of social work practice is a motivator for people who are involved in the work. People who do social work from the perspective of wanting to live up to this practice are not worried about external gains, like the amount of fame or money or things like that that they benefit from. The good the benefit that people reap from participating in a practice comes from participating in and doing an activity at a certain level of excellence, an activity that is worthy, that makes an important contribution. When people participate in a practice that's socially sanctioned, like social work or medicine, because it's socially sanctioned, it usually comes with kind of acknowledgement and reward from the broader society. It comes with the reward of prestige sometimes, the opportunity to self-discipline. So, for example, what does it mean that medicine is a profession? Notice that people who are in professions are serving members of society. They have expertise they can use to advance the well-being of members of society. And they also have power over these members of society. The doctor has power over the patient in many ways. One, usually when someone is sick, we go to the doctor and we're working on their turf, so they're comfortable in that environment. I'm not, the doctor's office or the hospital or whatever it is. Two, I'm usually sick, the doctor is well, so different power dynamic there. But three, and most importantly, when I'm sick and need help, all I know is that I need help. But I lack the knowledge required to make myself better, and I lack access to the resources to do what I need to actually improve my health. I have to rely on the professional, the doctor, who says, I recognize I'm in a conflict of interest situation. I recognize that on the one hand, I have to look after my own needs, I have to look after my own well-being, my family, things like that. And I'm in a position as a professional to look after the well-being of people who are vulnerable relative to me, who will rely on me to have their needs met. And so I profess, I promise to put my needs aside to some extent to look after the well-being of people who are relying on me to meet their needs. So a professional is always in a conflict of interest, and they're committing as part of being a profession to put aside their interests to serve the interests of others. Why do I share that story? Because one of the hallmarks of a practice, one of the external goods that comes with a practice, is self-monitoring, if you will. If a doctor makes a mistake, they don't necessarily get sued. What will happen is that a complaint might be made to the College of Physicians and Surgeons, and doctors will look at the performance of that physician to decide whether or not there was an error in the standard of practice, and they will support that doctor to live up to that error, to live up to that standard. So a practice includes the external good of having society give that profession the space to police themselves effectively, in simple terms. The point in all of this is that there are certain practices that are part of our society that are also legitimate sources of values and beliefs. And if it's the case that I am participating in society and I'm part of a tradition or practice, that's a legitimate and important place to look to understand what should matter as I try to figure out how I should move forward. And that has to be balanced with all of these other traditions or sources of values and beliefs as we're trying to navigate our way in the complex world we live in to try to find solutions to the questions that we face. So when the nurse is trying to figure out what should the discharge plan be for this patient, she legitimately looks to her profession to see what values should I live up to. She looks to the tradition she comes from, maybe from a faith perspective. She looks to the tradition of values and beliefs that inform what it looks like to the legal framework that governs BC. She looks to the values and beliefs of the tradition of the people who have lived here for millennia to see what they believe should matter. How do we navigate this complexity? How do we identify, prioritize, balance these values as we're trying to figure out how we should move forward in a given situation? So understanding these traditions of values is an important dimension of ethical literacy that we need to also pay attention to.